Hi everybody, I'm Stefan for Tuts+, and today I'm going to show you how to recreate the DC Comics logo opening animation using Illustrator, Cinema 4D and After Effects. The first part will be in Illustrator, where we are going to prepare the vector shapes for Cinema 4D. Here is the vector logo of DC Comics I was able to find for free on the internet. So let's get started. First of all, let's remove some of the parts we don't want. For example, like this part here, we don't need it. And let's see this part here as well. And let's open the layer and see what it contains. We don't need this part as well, so let's delete this one. And we need this, which is the C and the D part. And I'm going to select this, hit Ctrl C to copy the shape, and hit Ctrl N to create a new document, hit OK and hit Ctrl V to paste the shape. Now this is going to be the shape for the C letter, so I'm going to save this and go to File, Save As, and let's call this one C and hit Save. And remember to save under version 8 of Illustrator to be able to open the file in Cinema 4D. And let's click OK. And now we need to modify the shape a bit for the front part of the logo, which is the D. And I'm going to take the ellipse tool and go right into the center and draw a circle, just like that. And let's see if we need to tweak the circle a bit, and it seems that I did it perfectly from the first try, which is great. And now I'm going to select both of the layers and go to the Pathfinder and just unite the shapes in a single shape. And you can see I forgot this part here from the circle. I need to remove it. And now I'm going to hit Ctrl Z to undo the shape and select only this point of the circle here and move it inwards like that. And now select both of the shapes as well and unite them into a single shape. Afterwards I'm going to save this one, so let's hit Ctrl Shift S on the keyboard and let's call this one D and hit Save and save it under Illustrator version 8 and click OK. And finally we need to select the title here and just copy and paste it into a new document as well. And this is the title, you can see it up here, and I'm going to move it to the bottom part of my project, just like so. And this is my vector shape for the DC Comics title, so I'm going to hit Ctrl Shift S to save this one as well, and I'm going to name it title and hit Save. Again Illustrator 8 and click OK. And now I'm going to jump in Cinema 4D and import the vector shapes and start working on them. Here we are in Cinema 4D and I've already imported the vector shapes, as you can see, and they are right in the center of my document. So let's select the title and move it a bit, just like so. And let's go to the front view to move it to the side, like -27, looks good. And now we need to go to our perspective view and start extruding the shapes. For the C, I'm going to select the C, hold down Alt and just drop an extrude object to extrude the C, and let's name this one C. And I'm going to repeat the same step for the D. Let's name this one D as well, and the same one for the title. And I need to select the extrude object. Let's rename this one to title and make some room here. Go to object and click the checkbox, because we have a lot of splines here under the no object, and we need to let the extrude object know that we have more than one spline to extrude them. And now we need to set the extrusion for the C to 80, for example. So let's increase this and set it to 80. It looks good. And let's go to the caps tab for the C and create a fillet cap for both sides. And let's set the steps to 2 and the radius to 1. And click constrain. And I think we are ready with the C letter for now. And just go to the coordinates and let's move it a bit backwards so they don't intersect each other with the D part of the logo. And select the D and go to object, and we have quite thick part here. I like to reduce this one to 5, and let's reset the position. And now let's go to the caps tab again and create a fillet cap for the D element, and let's use the same settings, 2 steps and 1 centimeter for the radius. And for the type here we are going to use quadrangles and click regular grid, and let's go to display and display lines, and you can see how the grid looks like. And we are going to have some problems when bending the D part, so I'm going to turn off the extrude for the D and hide for a second the C. Select the spline for the D, go into point mode and go to mesh commands and go to subdivide and subdivide it like 8 times, 8 subdivisions, and click OK to add a lot of points so we have resolution to work with when we extrude and actually when we bend the object. And let's go to object mode again and enable the extrude object, and let's turn on the C part of the logo and select the extrude object. And for the width of the regular grid here we need to set this one to 1, so we have really dense mesh that we can bend without getting some errors. So that's it for the title. We need to increase the extrusion of the title to, let's see, 80 as well, so it has to be the same like the C letter. And let's go to the caps and again apply a fillet cap. Let's click constrain and use the same settings, 2 steps and 1 centimeter for the radius. And that's it. We are ready with our basic setup. Now let's create a few materials. So let's create our main material. So let's call this one main, and let's select the reflection channel and enable it. And we want just a simple 100% reflection here. Now let's go to the specular, and we need to decrease the width of the specular to 40 and increase the height as well, because we are going to use whites to create some interesting specular highlights on our object. So that's it for the main material. And let's create a copy, and let's call this one bevel. And let's see, we need to increase the height of the specular a lot for the bevel and keep the same width as for the main material. and this is going to be applied only on the bevels of our logo. Let's apply the materials. Let's select the bevel and apply it to the D, and in the selection type R1 and just copy and paste the material for all the objects, and just take the main and put it here on top. Let's zoom, and maybe we need to decrease this just so we can freely move in our viewport before we start rendering the object, because the mesh is really dense and this slows us down. Let's create a new white just to see if it works as expected, and you can see the result. We have some really nice specular highlights on the bevels. So let's delete this one and let's go to the modifiers and drop in bend deformer and open the D and drop the bend deformer here, and let's turn off the C and the title for now, and let's take the bend deformer and put it below the D spline. This is a really cool new feature in Cinema 4D R15, which I really like about the deformers that have a bounding box. If you select the deformer and hit this button here, fit to parent, it automatically fit the bend deformer bounding box to the size of the parent. And now if we try to bend, you can see the result. It saves a lot of time and it's pretty cool new feature, but we need to rotate the deformer a bit, so we need to set it to -90 degrees and check the rotation. Basically you have to play with the deformer and see how it works and how you need to rotate it, and I already did this, so I know the settings. I'm going just to rotate the deformer and hit again fit to parent, and it fits to the parent again. Now let's modify a bit the bend. Let's select it and go to object and click keep y-axis length, because if we bend this, you can see the result. It's deforming the shape a bit, and if we click it, this fixes it. And let's go to the coordinates for the bend, and we want to offset it a bit because we want to bend only this front part here. And now if I increase this a lot and maybe increase the size, you can see how it deforms the object, and if we click this, it fixes it. So let's increase the size to 215 and 360 and 410, and now we are going to create our animation. Let's set this to 0, or actually let's bend it a bit and hit R for the rotation and just offset it like 20 degrees to create the animation. And let's go to the first frame of our composition, or actually not the first, but we need to increase this to 400 frames before we proceed. I forgot to do that at the beginning. And let's go to frame 100 and set a keyframe for the strength at 0%. And now let's move to frame 280 and let's set this to -370 and set a keyframe. So that's our animation. You can see it in real time, and if I create a render, we might get some errors here, and I'm going to increase the density of the mesh later on. But before that, let's jump into the render settings and hit Ctrl B, and let's set the size of our project to 1280 by 720 and just close it. Now let's start adding some whites into the scene. Let's turn on again the rest of the objects, and let's add just a simple omni white. This is going to be our first white, so let's move it here. Let's go to the white properties, and we want sort of a white blue color. Let's try to eyeball it to the first one I used, so something like that I guess is okay. So that's basically something similar to the first color I used, and let's rename the white to specular 1, and we want to turn off the diffuse for this white, and we want to leave only the specular, and basically that's it. Increase the intensity to 200%, and you can see the result this white is creating. And we are going to use a combination of different whites and environment HDR image to give some nice reflections to the logo. So for this first white, I'm going to position it at the bottom here, and maybe set it here just to white the letters from the bottom, and you can see how they look like so far. And now let's create a copy of the white, and let's rename it to specular 2, and just position it like so to the side, and maybe move it up and backwards to white the letters from the back side here, to give some nice specular here on the logo. And maybe we can move this one like so into the back, and basically you have to tweak and try some different positioning of the whites until you get the result you like. So let's create a new copy of the white, and let's position it again to the top this time, something like that, and maybe push it forward like so, to create a specular highlight here on the top side of the logo. As you can see, this specular highlight. Let's create another copy, and let's position it here. So I want a nice specular highlight right here, and on this copy we are going to reduce the intensity to 150%, and let's go to the coordinates again and move it closer to our subject like so, and this is the result as you can see. And basically that's it. We don't need to create any more whites. We have our bending animation. So let's go to the content browser, and I'm going to use the Grayscale Guerrilla HDR Studio Pack, and I'm going to drop down the rig into the project, and I'm going to use a custom HDR I was able to find. Let me show you how the HDR looks like. So that's it. I just applied a slight blur to the entire image because I don't want it to get sharp reflections, and this is a pretty cool trick to get the blurry reflections from the environment. Instead of applying blurry reflections on the material in Cinema 4D, which slows down the render a lot, you can blur the HDR in Photoshop and set it as an environment. And in this particular case, I wanted to have blurry reflections from the environment, but sharp reflections from the objects here, that the letters reflect each other and so on. So let me drop the HDR into the rig and let's create a quick render to see how it looks like. And you can see the result. Let's rotate this until we get what we want, and you might need to tweak some of the settings, but basically that's the look we are going for. Let's create a plane object and let's set the size of the plane. Let's scale it up to maybe something like 1200 by 1200, and we need only one segment, so I'm going to set it to 1 and select the plane and set the orientation like so. And actually it doesn't matter because we are going to rotate this one anyway, and let's set it -600 on the Y axis, and we want this to create a nice reflection on the letters, and maybe push it backwards a bit and select the plane, right click Cinema 4D tags and apply compositing tag, and click scene by camera because we don't want to see this one. And let's create a new material and let's call it plane. Let's turn off the color and the specular and enable the luminance, and I'm going to use sort of a blue color for this and something like that, and reduce the brightness to 25% and drop it on the plane because otherwise the reflections are too strong. And go to the studio rig and increase the brightness a bit like that. I think we are good to go. Maybe increase the hue to 180 to get a blue color, more of a blue color overall tone. And now we need to create a light that come from the back of the logo and create the volumetric white rays. So let's make some room here and create a spotlight. And as you can see, the first thing we need to do is to rotate the spotlight like so, and let's move it something like so, and push it back like 500. Go to the general tab and set the intensity to 500 and play with the color, make it a blue color. Let's reduce the green like so and reduce the blue as well. Let's set the visible light to volumetric and let's turn off the specular and diffuse. We don't want this white to affect our object in any way. We just want the specular, we just want the volumetric whites. Let's go to the details tab and increase the inner angle a bit, and actually we need to increase the outer angle first. Let's set the outer angle to 70 degrees and set the inner angle to 60 degrees, and after that let's move to the visibility tab and we need to increase the outer distance to maybe 1200. And if we do a render now, let's create a render, and this is the result. And we are going to keyframe the intensity of the white. So let's go to frame 1, go to the general tab and set a keyframe for the intensity, and then move to frame 260 and let's set the intensity to 0 and create another keyframe. And let's see, it looks okay to me. And finally we need to create our camera animation. So let's drop a camera into the project. Let's select the camera, right click, go to Cinema 4D tags and drop a line to spline tag and also a, let's see, target tag. And we need to create a new object, and let's rename this one to target, and let's create a circle spline, and I'm going to turn off for a second the spotlight to remove the lines from it so I can set up my camera animation. And let's select the circle and just drop it into the align to spline tag and set the position to 75 so the camera looks forward. And we need to select the circle and go to the plane and set it to XZ and go to the first frame and set a keyframe for the radius and set it to 10. Go to the coordinates and let's set this one to -30, this one to -260, so the camera is right here at the bottom. Set a keyframe for this parameter, and on the Z set it to 50 so it's right in the middle of the logo. And we need to go to frame 240 and change the settings. Set the Y of the circle to -350 and increase the radius quite a lot, 1600, and set a keyframe. And basically this is the animation. And for the target, let's drop the target object here, select the target, go to the first frame and let's set this to 30 and this to 50 on the Z-axis, and on the Y-axis let's set it to -150 and set a keyframe. Go to frame 240 and set this to -85 just to move the camera a bit upwards. And basically we're creating this animation. Let's enable the camera. Now to fix this, let's select the target, go to the first frame and set this to -30, and as you can see this fixes the problem. And let's create a test render. Let's turn on the white and this is how it looks like. I think it's pretty good. Let's go to the render settings and click on the anti-aliasing and set it to best, and I'm going to set it to 4x4 by 8x8 just to make sure that I don't have any nasty edges here on my logo. And let's go to multipass and I'm going to export specular. I'm going to export reflection and I'm going to export, let's see, atmosphere, and enable the multipass. And let's set this to PNG sequence with alpha channel, and this one as well as a PNG sequence. And I'm exporting these passes because most of the things I have here are specular, reflection, and I'm exporting the atmosphere effects for the volumetric white in the background because I want to apply some noise, fractal noise animation on it like a fog, and I don't want to create this here in Cinema 4D using the noise tab here because it's pretty flexible and easy to change the noise and animate it in After Effects instead of doing it here, because if I don't like the final result I'm going to need to re-render the entire sequence and then work again in After Effects on it, and it's pretty slow thing, so I prefer to do it in After Effects. So that's it for the Cinema 4D part. I'm going to export this. You just need to select your output folder and export the sequences, and since I already did it, I'm going to jump in After Effects and show you how to quickly composite the fractal noise and maybe some basic color corrections. And just remember to set the frame range to all frames when you are ready to export your sequence. So that's it for the Cinema 4D part. Let's jump in After Effects. Here we are in After Effects with all the passes we exported. So let's take the beauty pass here and drop it into a new composition. And as you can see, this is the animation. And at the beginning I have a pretty long, like 20 frames long interval of only pure white, and I'm going to trim this to start from the first second mark, and I'm going to drop the specular on top of this one, the reflection and the atmosphere effects. And you can see this is the white only. Let's set this to screen, and let's set the specular to add maybe, and let's set the reflection to screen as well, and let's set the specular to 5%. We want just to increase it just a bit, and you can play with the reflection as well. Let's tone it down to 50%, and here is the white. We can increase the white even more if we set this to add, and I'm going to keep it to in add mode, and you can select this and maybe go to effect, color correction, hue and saturation. You can change the color if you like, and you can create some pretty interesting results that way, but I'm going to leave it as my original color. And now let's create a new layer. Let's call it BG for background, and let's drop it here, and let's apply a ramp, and we are going to use a radial ramp. Let's set this point right in the center, and let's, for the middle point, let's choose sort of a dark color from the logo, just to have some color in the background. Maybe increase the saturation a bit, and to avoid like banding or something when you export the logo, you can increase the ramp scatter, which creates something like noise into the ramp and prevents bending. So let's set this one to 100. Let's create a new layer, and let's call it fractal noise, and let's go to noise and grain and apply fractal noise, and I'm going to use the, let's see, dynamic fractal noise. Let's increase the contrast a bit, maybe decrease the brightness, and on the evolution I'm going to animate this, and alt click and type time multiplied by 100, which animates the fractal noise. It's pretty simple expression. And maybe go to the transform and increase the scale just a bit, you can increase or decrease the complexity of the noise. I prefer to increase it like to 15. And let's duplicate the atmosphere layer, and we are going to use this one. As you can see, it doesn't have alpha channel, so we are going to use this one as a Woma mat. And as you can see, this is how it looks like. Let's change the fractal noise to screen blending mode and just create some pretty nice detail into the white. If you increase the brightness, you are going to increase the noise, and you can play with the opacity if it's too intense for your taste. But basically that's it. Now let's create an adjustment layer. Go to layer, new adjustment layer, and I'm going to apply Real Smart Motion Blur on this one and set the motion sensitivity to 50, just to create a nice subtle motion blur. The movement isn't that fast, but at this frame here you can see if I turn off the motion blur, the image is perfectly sharp, and if I turn it on, it has some motion blur, and I like it that way. So I'm going to keep the motion blur, and let's create a new adjustment layer and go to Effect, and let's see, blur and sharpen, and let's sharpen this a bit, like 15 or maybe 10. Go to Effect, Noise and Grain, and apply noise, set it to 5 and uncheck use color noise. Finally, you can apply some glow if you wish, but I prefer to keep it that way. And you can animate just a simple lens flare. Let's create a new layer and call it OF for optical flares, and go to Effect, Video Copilot, Optical Flares, and I'm going to select a flare from the presets here. For example, this one, it's a bit different than the original I used, but I really like it. So let's decrease the scale to 50% and maybe make it a blue color, and set the blending mode to add for the lens flare, and go to frame 8 and set the position of the lens flare here, and set a keyframe for the position and the brightness, and set the brightness to 0 and move 4 seconds forward, and let's move the lens flare to the bottom of the D letter, like so, and hit U to reveal the keyframes, and set another keyframe for the brightness at 0, and go right into the middle and set this to 100% or maybe 150, and that's it. That's our animation. Let's put the lens flare below the sharpen and the noise, and let me create a quick RAM preview to see the final result. So this is the final result. As you can see, I think it came out pretty good. So that's it, how to recreate the DC Comics logo opening animation. Hope you like this tutorial and find it useful. Once again, I'm Stefan for Tuts Plus, and we'll see you next time.